The cold wind whistled through the wooden crosses that stood like silent sentinels over the freshly dug graves. As Delilah Chambers knelt in the dirt, her black mourning dress billowing around her like a dark cloud. The tears had long since dried on her face, leaving salty tracks down her hollow cheeks as she placed a single wildflower on each of the 3 small mounds, one for her husband, 2 for her young sons, all claimed by the relentless fever that had torn through their homestead with merciless efficiency just days before. Wyoming Territory, 1877. The harsh frontier had never felt more unforgiving than it did now, as twilight descended across the open plains. Delilah had buried her entire family in less than a week's time, digging the graves herself when her strength allowed, finishing the grim task just before sunset. Now she sat motionless, her body swaying slightly with exhaustion, unwilling to leave them alone in the growing darkness. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. A tall figure on horseback materialized from the dusky light, the silhouette of a man against the fading crimson sky. Her hand instinctively moved toward the small derringer, hidden in the folds of her dress, the last gift from her husband Thomas, before the sickness took him. "Evening, madam," the rider called softly, dismounting with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and a face weathered by sun and wind, yet not unkind. "Name's Samuel Blackburn. Folks in town call me Sam." Delilah remained silent, her fingers still wrapped around the concealed pistol as the stranger approached slowly, respectfully keeping his distance from the graves. "I was riding by," he continued, his voice gentle as he gestured toward the crosses. "Saw you out here alone. Didn't seem right." "Nothing about this is right," Delilah replied, her voice cracking from disuse. "But it's not your concern, Mr. Blackburn." The cowboy's eyes, the color of faded denim, took in the 3 crosses, understanding dawning across his features. "Your family." She nodded once, unable to speak the truth aloud yet again. Samuel knelt in the dirt a respectful distance from her, his hat held against his chest. "I'm mighty sorry for your loss, madam." He glanced at the darkening sky, then back to the hollow-eyed woman before him. "They're gone, but you still deserve warmth tonight. Nobody should keep vigil alone." The simple words, spoken without pity but with genuine compassion, broke something loose inside her. Tears she thought had been exhausted days ago welled up anew, spilling down her face as her shoulders shook with silent grief. Samuel didn't move to touch her, didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply remained, a steady presence as darkness enveloped them both. When her tears subsided, he spoke again. "Your homestead nearby?" he asked. "Just over that rise," she answered, nodding toward a gentle hill where the faint outline of a cabin stood silhouetted against the deepening blue of night. "Let me see you safely home, Mrs. Chambers." "Delilah Chambers," Samuel nodded. "Mrs. Chambers. The night's getting cold and these plains aren't kind after dark." Delilah looked at the freshly turned earth one last time. "I can't leave them." "They aren't here anymore, madam," Samuel said softly. "Not really. And they wouldn't want you catching your death in the night chill." The truth of his words settled over her. With trembling legs she stood, accepting his outstretched hand only when her knees threatened to buckle beneath her. "I've got supplies," he said, gesturing to his horse. "Food, coffee. If you'll permit me, I can build you a fire. Then I'll be on my way." Delilah studied his face in the gathering darkness, searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, she gave a small nod. "I would be grateful for the fire." The cabin was cold and still when they arrived, the absence of life within its walls palpable. While Delilah lit a lamp, Samuel efficiently built a fire in the stone hearth, the warm light gradually pushing back the shadows that had claimed the modest home. "When did they pass?" Samuel asked quietly as he worked. "Thomas, my husband, 4 days ago. The boys, Jacob and Michael." Her voice faltered. "Yesterday morning, both within hours of each other." Samuel's hand stilled for a moment. "The mountain fever," she nodded. "It came on so quickly." Thomas insisted on riding to town for the doctor when the boys first showed symptoms. By the time he returned, he was burning with it himself. The familiar ache of loss throbbed in her chest. The doctor came the next day, but said there was nothing to be done except try to keep the fever down. It wasn't enough. The fire caught, flames dancing across the dry kindling. Samuel stood, dusting his hands on his worn denim pants. "I lost my sister and her husband to the same fever 3 winters past, left their little girl an orphan." A shadow crossed his face. "She's with my mother now, back in Missouri." The shared grief created a momentary connection between them, tenuous but real. Delilah found herself studying him more carefully in the firelight. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke more of laughter than hardship. "You're not from around here," she observed. "No, madam. I'm working as a trail guide, bringing settlers up from Colorado Territory. My group made it to Laramie yesterday. I'm scouting ahead for the return journey." "That's dangerous work." A slight smile touched his lips. "Less dangerous than trying to farm these parts alone, I'd reckon." The quiet truth of his words hung between them. Delilah turned away, moving mechanically toward the kitchen area. "I should offer you something, please. Don't trouble yourself," Samuel interrupted, reaching for his saddlebags. "I've got provisions to share." From the worn leather bag, he produced jerky, hardtack, and a small pouch of coffee beans. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing." For the first time in days, Delilah felt the gnawing emptiness of hunger. She hadn't eaten properly since Thomas fell ill, subsisting on whatever she could manage between tending to the sick and, later, digging graves. While Samuel prepared a simple meal, Delilah found herself watching his efficient movements. There was something comforting in his presence, not intrusive, but steadying, like a sturdy handhold in rushing water. "You have family nearby, Mrs. Chambers?" he asked as he handed her a tin cup of strong coffee. "No. Thomas and I came west from Pennsylvania 3 years ago. His brother was supposed to join us this spring." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I need to write and tell him not to come." Samuel nodded soberly. "And what will you do now?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Delilah wasn't ready to face. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Burying them was all I could manage." "Of course," he replied gently. "But when you're ready to consider it, these parts are hard on those alone." "Are you suggesting I abandon my land, everything we worked for?" A flicker of anger sparked within her, the first emotion besides grief she'd felt in days. Samuel held up a hand. "Not at all. Just speaking truth, Mrs. Chambers. Winter's coming in a few months. It's a harsh season for a solitary soul." The anger faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Delilah exhausted. "I know," she whispered, "but this land is all I have left of them." They ate in silence after that, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the small cabin. When the meal was finished, Samuel rose. "I should let you rest," he said, collecting his hat. "Thank you for sharing your fire." Delilah felt a sudden, irrational panic at the thought of being alone again in the empty house. "It's late," she found herself saying. "The trail back to town is treacherous in the dark." "You could," she stopped, propriety warring with her fear of solitude. "The barn has a decent sleeping loft, if you'd prefer not to ride back tonight." Samuel studied her face, understanding what the offer had cost her. "That's kind." If you're certain it wouldn't be an imposition, I'd be grateful to rest my horse. Relief washed through her. It's settled then. After seeing to his horse, Samuel returned briefly to the cabin. If you need anything in the night, just call out. I'm a light sleeper. He hesitated at the door. I'll be gone at first light, heading back to Laramie. Delilah nodded, unsure why the news brought a small pang of disappointment. Safe travels, Mr. Blackburn, and thank you for the kindness you've shown a stranger. His smile was gentle. Out here, Mrs. Chambers. There are no strangers, only friends we haven't properly met yet. Good night. After he left, Delilah moved through the quiet cabin, her mind inexplicably clearer than it had been in days. Though grief still pressed heavily upon her, the paralyzing fog that had enveloped her since Thomas's death seemed to have lifted slightly. For the first time, she began to contemplate what came next. The homestead required constant work that Thomas had managed while she tended to the boys and the household. She had no illusions about her ability to maintain it alone, especially with winter approaching. Yet the thought of abandoning what they had built, of leaving the land where her family now lay buried, was unbearable. Sleep came fitfully that night, but it came nonetheless, the first real rest she'd had since the fever struck her household. In the gray light of dawn, she woke to the soft sounds of movement outside. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she stepped onto the small porch. Samuel was already saddled and ready to depart, securing his bedroll to the back of his mount. He looked up at her appearance, tipping his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Chambers. Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she assured him, descending the steps. "I wanted to thank you again before you left." He nodded, adjusting the cinch on his saddle. "I've left more coffee and some provisions on your table. Not much, but enough for a few days." The unexpected generosity touched her. "You didn't have to do that. Consider it neighborly courtesy." He mounted his horse with easy grace. "I'll be returning this way in about a week's time, heading back toward Colorado Territory with the settlers. If you've need of anything from town in the meantime, I'd be happy to bring it." Delilah hesitated, pride warring with practicality. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to delay your journey." "It's no trouble. Your homestead is directly on my route." He regarded her steadily. "It's not charity, Mrs. Chambers, just one neighbor helping another." After a moment, she nodded. "There are a few things I could use from the general store, if you're certain it's not an imposition." "Not at all. Make your list, and I'll see to it when I return." As Samuel prepared to depart, a thought occurred to Delilah. "Mr. Blackburn, how did you come to find me yesterday? You said you were riding by, but this isn't exactly on the main trail." A faint color touched his weathered cheeks. "Truth be told, I saw the fresh graves from the ridge when I was scouting. Thought perhaps someone might need assistance." He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the morning sun. "I'm glad I stopped." "As am I," she admitted softly. With a final nod, Samuel clicked to his horse and rode away, his figure gradually diminishing against the vast Wyoming landscape. Delilah watched until he disappeared over the horizon, then turned back to the silent cabin, oddly strengthened by the brief encounter. The days that followed were filled with the laborious work of survival. Delilah focused on practical tasks, tending the small vegetable garden, preserving what food she could, chopping wood for the coming cold. Each morning and evening, she visited the graves, gradually accepting that this was her new reality. True to his word, Samuel returned 6 days later, his saddlebags laden with the supplies she had requested, along with a few unexpected additions: a book of poetry, a small sack of hard candies, things that weren't necessities but brought a momentary brightness to her days. "The storekeeper sent these along when I mentioned your name," Samuel explained when she questioned the extras. Said your husband always brought you candies when he came to town. The thoughtful gesture brought fresh tears to her eyes. Mr. Davies has a good memory, she murmured, turning the candy sack in her hands. Thank you for bringing these. Samuel stayed for a meal this time, a simple stew Delilah had prepared from garden vegetables, and a rabbit she'd managed to snare. As they ate, he spoke of his travels, of the families heading west to start anew, of the changing landscape as summer began its slow surrender to fall. How long will you continue guiding settlers? Delilah asked as they sat on the porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the plains in gold and crimson. Until the mountain passes close with snow, he replied. Then I'll winter in Colorado, pick up again in spring. It sounds lonely, she observed. Samuel considered this. I suppose it can be, but there's a freedom to it that suits me. He glanced at her. What about you, Mrs. Chambers? Have you decided what comes next? Delilah sighed, her gaze drifting toward the small cemetery on the hill. I can't leave them, she said simply. But staying means finding a way to work this land alone, at least until I can sell it come spring. It's a lot for one person, Samuel acknowledged, especially with winter coming. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Blackburn. A smile touched his lips. I don't doubt that for a second. But strength alone won't keep the wolves from your door when snow lies deep. What would you suggest? She asked, more curious than defensive. Hire help if you can afford it. If not, perhaps consider wintering in town. He hesitated. Or with neighbors who have room to spare. Delilah shook her head. The nearest neighbors are the Hendersons, 10 miles east, and they've troubles enough of their own without taking in a widow. There are other options, Samuel said carefully. When I return next time, I could stay a few days. Help with the heavier work before winter sets in. The offer surprised her. You hardly know me, Mr. Blackburn. Why would you do that? His eyes met hers steadily. Because out here we look after each other. It's the only way any of us survive. The simple truth of his words resonated with her. After a moment's consideration, Delilah nodded. I would welcome the help, and I can pay not much but something. We'll discuss terms when I return, he said, rising to his feet. I should head back to my camp before full dark. This time, when Samuel rode away, Delilah found herself counting the days until his return. True to his word, Samuel returned 2 weeks later, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies and tools. I've got a week before I need to head south, he explained as he unloaded the animals. Thought we might make the most of it. The days that followed established a rhythm that felt both strange and comforting to Delilah. Samuel worked from sunrise to sunset repairing the cabin roof, reinforcing the barn, splitting enough firewood to last well into winter. Delilah cooked their meals and continued her own work, harvesting the last of the garden and preserving what she could. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking of their pasts, of the lives they'd led before circumstances brought them to this moment. Samuel spoke of growing up in Missouri, of losing his parents young and raising his sister, of taking to the trails when staying in one place felt too confining. And you, he asked one night, what brought you and your husband so far from Pennsylvania? Delilah gazed into the flames, remembering. Thomas had dreams bigger than our small town could hold. He read about the Homestead Act and became convinced that our future lay out west. A sad smile crossed her face. He was so certain we'd find prosperity here. Even when the first harvest failed, even when the winter nearly broke us, he never lost faith. He sounds like a good man. He was, she agreed softly, stubborn as the day is long but good. She looked up, meeting Samuel's steady gaze. What about you? No wife waiting somewhere? A shadow passed over his features. There was someone once, Kate. We were to be married when I returned from the war. He absently rubbed his left shoulder where Delilah had noticed he sometimes favored an old injury. "I came back different, restless." She wanted the man who left, not the one who returned. "I'm sorry," Delilah said, meaning it. Samuel shrugged. "It was for the best. She's married now with children. Happy, I hope. And you, are you happy, Mr. Blackburn?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Samuel considered it seriously. "I'm content with my choices," he finally answered. Not many men can say as much. As the week progressed, Delilah found herself watching Samuel when he wasn't aware, observing the careful precision with which he worked, the quiet competence in his movements. There was something reassuring in his presence, a steadiness that anchored her when grief threatened to pull her under. On the 5th day, they rode together to town for supplies they couldn't produce themselves: sugar, salt, ammunition, medicine. It was Delilah's first trip to town since the deaths, and she steeled herself for the pitying looks, the well-intentioned but painful condolences. Samuel seemed to sense her apprehension. "We can be quick about it," he offered as they approached the small settlement. "Just the essentials." Delilah straightened in her saddle. "No, I need to face them sometime. Might as well be today." The shopkeeper, Mr. Davies, greeted her with genuine warmth, clasping her hands in his. "Mrs. Chambers, it does my heart good to see you. We've all been worried." "I'm managing," she replied, grateful for his kindness. As they gathered their supplies, townspeople stopped to offer condolences. Most were sincere, a few awkward, but none were as difficult as Delilah had feared. Samuel remained nearby, a quiet, supportive presence that gave her strength. "The widow Chambers seems to have found herself a protector," a voice commented loudly as they loaded their purchases onto the horses. Delilah turned to see Horace Wilkins, the town's self-appointed moral guardian, watching them with disapproval. Hardly seemly, a woman alone with a strange man, so soon after burying her husband. Samuel tensed beside her, but Delilah placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Wilkins," she said clearly, "Mr. Blackburn has been kind enough to assist with preparations for winter, as any good Christian would do for a neighbor in need. Perhaps you might consider following his example rather than spreading malicious gossip." Wilkins flushed red, muttering something under his breath as he stalked away. Samuel glanced at Delilah with newfound respect. "Remind me never to cross you, Mrs. Chambers," he said with a hint of a smile. "Thomas always said I had a scholar's tongue and a warrior's heart," she replied, surprising herself with the easy mention of her husband without the usual stab of pain. They rode home in companionable silence, the encounter in town having shifted something subtle between them. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Delilah found the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens after winter, Mr. Blackburn?" "To this place, to me," Samuel considered her thoughtfully. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to honor Thomas's dream, to somehow make this homestead thrive. But I'm not foolish enough to think I can manage it alone." She sighed. Yet the thought of selling, of leaving them. Her gaze drifted toward the window, beyond which lay the 3 crosses on the hill. "You wouldn't have to leave," Samuel said quietly. "Not necessarily." Delilah looked at him questioningly. "There are arrangements that could be made," he continued carefully. "Partnerships that would allow you to stay on the land while ensuring its prosperity." "What kind of partnerships?" Samuel's eyes held her steadily. "The kind between 2 people who respect each other, who might in time come to care for each other." The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Delilah felt her breath catch. Samuel. It was the first time she'd used his given name. "Are you suggesting marriage? We barely know each other." "I'm suggesting possibility," he corrected gently. "Not now, it's far too soon, I know that. but perhaps when I return in the spring, if you're amenable, we might explore whether there could be more between us than neighborly kindness." Delilah was silent for a long moment, emotions warring within her. Guilt at the thought of another man when Thomas was so recently buried. Hope at the prospect of not facing her future entirely alone. Fear of opening her heart to potential loss once more. "I don't know what to say," she finally admitted. "You don't need to say anything now," Samuel assured her. "It's just something to consider in the months ahead." The following morning, Samuel prepared to depart. The week had transformed the homestead. The roof no longer leaked. The barn was secure. Cords of firewood were stacked neatly against the cabin wall, and the root cellar was filled with preserved foods. "You should be set until spring," Samuel said as he saddled his horse. "The Hendersons know to check on you if the weather turns bad. I've arranged with Mr. Davies to extend credit if you need additional supplies." Delilah nodded, fighting an unexpected tightness in her throat. "I don't know how to thank you for all you've done." "No thanks needed," he replied simply. "Just promise you'll be here when I return in April." The winter months passed more slowly than any in Delilah's memory. The snow came early and heavy, blanketing the plains in white silence. On clear days, she visited the graves, talking to Thomas and the boys as if they could hear her, telling them of her struggles, her small triumphs, and, increasingly, her confusing feelings about Samuel Blackburn. "It feels like betrayal," she confessed to Thomas's cross one bitter January morning. "To even consider caring for someone else. Yet I think you'd want me to live, not just survive." The wind whipped around her, stealing her words. "I miss you, I always will, but I'm so tired of being alone." As winter gradually relinquished its grip on the land, Delilah found herself watching the southern horizon with increasing frequency. April arrived with its usual capriciousness: warm sunshine one day, icy rain the next, and still no sign of Samuel. "He may have found another route," she told herself, trying to quell her disappointment. "Or perhaps he's decided against returning at all." Then, on a clear morning in late April, a rider appeared on the distant ridge. Even at that distance, Delilah recognized the straight-backed figure, the distinctive way Samuel sat his horse. Her heart leaped traitorously in her chest. He rode directly to the cabin, dismounting with easy grace despite the months in the saddle. "Mrs. Chambers," he greeted her, removing his hat. "You're looking well." She was suddenly acutely aware of her simple dress, her hair hastily pinned up that morning. "As are you, Mr. Blackburn. Your journey was successful, mostly." He glanced toward the 3 crosses on the hill, now surrounded by spring wildflowers. "May I pay my respects before we talk?" Touched by the gesture, Delilah nodded. She watched as Samuel walked to the small cemetery, head bowed in silent communion with the dead. When he returned, there was a solemnity to his expression. "I asked for his blessing," he said quietly. "Whose blessing?" "Your husband's." Samuel met her gaze directly. "I told him I'd look after you proper if you'd have me." Delilah's breath caught. "Samuel." "I've had all winter to think on this," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. "I know it's soon. I know you may not be ready, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." From his pocket, he withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I've carried it with me since she passed, waiting for the right woman to give it to." He held it out to her, a question in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to forget them. I would never ask that. I'm just asking if there might be room in your heart for me too." Tears blurred Delilah's vision as she looked at the man before her, this kind, steady man who had appeared when she needed him most. "I don't know if I can be what you want," she whispered. "I want you, Delilah, just as you are, with all your grief and memories and strength." He took a step closer. "I know what it is to rebuild a life from ashes. We could do it together." She looked past him to the 3 crosses on the hill, silhouetted against the spring sky. For a moment, she could almost feel Thomas's presence, his gentle encouragement to embrace life even as she honored his memory. "Yes," she said finally, turning back to Samuel with tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." The smile that lit his face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Gently, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms. His kiss was tender, reverent, a promise of warmth for all the nights to come. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Laramie, with the townsfolk who had come to care for the widowed Mrs. Chambers gathering to witness the unexpected joy that had blossomed from tragedy. Together, they returned to the homestead not as widow and cowboy, but as husband and wife, ready to build something new while honoring what had come before. In the years that followed, the homestead flourished under their combined care. Samuel's experience with the land and Delilah's determined spirit proved a formidable partnership. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, first a daughter with Samuel's blue eyes and Delilah's quiet strength, then twin boys who brought laughter back to the silent places of her heart. On summer evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching their children play in the golden light, the 3 crosses on the hill standing sentinel in the distance. Samuel would take her hand, his thumb brushing over the simple gold band that had come to symbolize not replacement, but continuation, the enduring capacity of the human heart to heal, to remember, and to love again. "I still miss them," Delilah would sometimes confess in the quiet darkness of their bedroom. "I know," Samuel would answer, drawing her close, "and that's as it should be. They made you who you are, and I love every part of you." In those moments, Delilah knew that the cowboy had been right on that first night beside the graves. They were gone, but she deserved warmth, deserved love and family and future. And in finding that truth, she had somehow managed to keep faith with those she had lost, while embracing the unexpected gift of the life that had found her.